Welcome to Season 3 of The Spiritually Curious Therapist, the podcast for mental health professionals, healers, and seekers who believe that true healing happens at the intersection of psychotherapy, nervous system science, and holistic body-centered wisdom. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, licensed therapist, Reiki master and teacher, and all-around consciousness guide. I'm here to explore how we integrate the clinical with the intuitive, the evidence-based with the energetic, and the psychological with the soulful. Each week, we will dive into practices, frameworks, and conversations that support deep healing, both for ourselves and the people we serve. And just a quick note, while I'm a licensed therapist, this podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only and is not a substitute for therapy. So let's get curious about the body, the nervous system, the heart, and the wisdom that lives within it all. Hi, and welcome back to the Spiritually Curious Therapist. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Paula Scatoloni, LCSW, SEP. Paula is a teacher of somatics, psychology, spirituality, and sound, with over 2 decades of experience integrating modern science and ancient wisdom into transformational healing practices. Paula was also the co-developer of Embodied Recovery Institute. She's trained in modalities such as Somatic Experiencing, Sensorimotor Psychotherapy, internal family systems, and biofield tuning. She offers a multidimensional approach to mind-body healing rooted in both Western psychological concepts and holistic medicine perspectives. Paula's work is devoted to helping individuals and healing professionals reconnect with the intelligence of the body, restore nervous system balance, and cultivate deeper self-love and embodied presence. Through courses, retreats, and mentorship, she creates a safe relational space where personal, ancestral, and collective healing can unfold. Paula is a certified mentor for the Safe and Sound Protocol and is the lead author of the SSP-SE, so for those of you who don't know, that's Somatic Experiencing Guidelines. She is also a featured provider in the new book, Safe and Sound, by Dr. Stephen Porges and Karen Ondurko. Her business, Transformative Harmonics, combines sound-based programs such as the SSP and the RRP, to support sustained change for the body, mind, and spirit. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I am so excited for you to be here and to hear more about what you have been up to and how you are using sound for transformation and healing. I'll just say, full disclosure, I took a Paula mentorship course and also participated in one of her groups for sound mentorship using the SSP. And that was one of my first forays into the SSP after I got trained as a provider. So I am so excited to have Paula here and to be able to interview her about all of the wonderful work that she is doing. So why don't we start, Paula, with tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are, and what's most important to you now today as you do this work.
Beautiful. Well, first of all, it was a joy to have you in the group, and I'm so glad our paths have crossed. So I will try to make this succinct as we get to know your community. But I think for myself, and I don't know if this counts for you as well, I've always had one foot in the more traditional models of working with beliefs and top-down approaches, and then a foot in the non-traditional models of the body and the bottom-up approaches. And I've always done that ever since the 1980s. And there was other models at that time, right, that we used, Gestalt therapy and experiential therapy and art therapy. And now we're in this renaissance and time of somatics and also psychedelic assisted processes and processes that allow us to take deeper explorations, right, into the mind and body and that connection. So I'm one of those providers who've been on this journey forever and tend to, get drawn towards the latest thing. What's that shiny object over there?
Me too. I can completely relate to that. Yes.
So I found myself, even though I had been exploring somatics in the other ways throughout the 80s, when somatic experiencing became available, I thought, whoa, what's this? And I had a friend who knew me quite well, and he said, I think these are your people. So I went in, and if you've ever had a training where you walk in and they begin to talk, and I said, oh, I think this is it. This is the place where it's all going to come together.
Yeah.
And that's what SE was for me. At the time, I was treating eating disorders and had started. I was at Duke University at the time, and I had a whole team of people and was teaching and mentoring folks who were getting their LCSW, but also providing clinical support for clients. And I'm always looking for something that's going to be more helpful than what we had. And with eating disorders, we had a lot of top-down approaches for many years. So I was one of those who began to bring the body into eating disorder treatment. The word somatics was not even used at that time. So we had to find ways to talk about the body and the nervous system being the hub, and it really explained for me a lot of the symptomology that I was seeing with my clients. But then across the board, it was explaining depression to me, it was explaining anxiety. So it just felt like a natural home. And from that, after you finish the somatic experiencing training, you can go on for further training. So you move into touch work, and you start to get a little deeper into some of those places that might, for me, help me access the pre-verbal material and the material that may have come up and created some dysregulation from very early on. And so that was my own journey. So we're always kind of drawn to our own journey. So I kept going for my own work and ended up in one training after another, in touch work. Dave Berger, Kathy Kane, some of these faculty members who are body workers themselves. So therapists who train with body workers. And from there, around 2017 is when I first started using sound. And I was combining that with touch work. And sound at that time was relatively new as well, right? It was another vehicle for entering into the body through the auditory pathway. And it was being used with children with autism, right, by occupational therapists. So it was really fun and exciting and interesting to be at the beginning of that process as a trauma therapist to understand what capacity sound had for supporting the healing of trauma. And because my background was in working with parts work and developmental trauma, I naturally began to get curious about its impact with the attachment system. And so that is what I studied, both on myself and my clients. I had taken Diane Paul Heller's trainings. I understood from various people about the different ways the attachment system might show up somatically. And I was seeing that expressed through the sound program as I used it. So my curiosity continued, and I kept using the sound. Eventually, it expanded beyond sound into the healing arts in general, right? And sound is a bigger, it's way more than the Safe and Sound protocol. It's a field in and of itself, right? So I began to study sound through other mediums, and those mediums taught me more about what the Safe and Sound was doing from the lens of frequency, from the lens of how sound heals. And so I was able then to bring those things back in addition to other more ancient ways of healing that you've even crossed into, right? Yep. That understands how frequency works, right? And what it means to work with frequency and the subtle energy system. So now we're in this beautiful soup where we start to see the layers of the Western and the Eastern come together. And sound for me is that place where I can have my foot in both of those worlds at the same time, and has profound effects when we can hold it in that more expansive way.
Wow. So that is quite a journey, I will say. Thank you for sharing that because I don't think I had heard that before. So I really appreciate all of the layers and the steps that it took for you to get to where you are now. And I can totally relate to like the next shiny thing and then like knowing which next shiny thing is the right next shiny thing. So maybe we go this way, back up, go that way. So I can totally appreciate that and where you are now and this idea of this soup with all of these different layers and this blend of Western, Eastern, and even ancient and indigenous traditions, because I do know that you bring a lot of that knowledge and learning into your work as well. And it's like this whole new dimension through which we look at healing. It's so beautiful. I'm curious if you could say more about frequency, because a lot of people, when we think about sound, we don't really understand frequency and subtle energy and vibrations and how all of those things come together to affect living things. And that's across the board. I mean, nature, trees, flowers, we're all affected.
Yes, I think you've said it in that everything is frequency. So that's the biggest paradigm shift, right?
Yes.
To think about ourselves as energy first and then matter second.
Hmm.
So I'm glad you brought that in. I think as well as you're saying, we're not conscious of the various frequencies that are around us day to day and how those impact us. And so in the world of somatics, we use the word resources, right? Do you use that in your
Yeah.
trauma lens, right?
Yeah.
So something resonant that works with your frequency, that feels good, which is say it feels good, right? Is a frequency that's resonant for you. And that
Mm.
could be explained by when you're with a certain person, you just feel good. When you are in a certain place, you just can breathe, you can exhale a little bit more, right? But maybe when you're in traffic, you start to tense up and you start to have a reaction to that frequency, right? Of the sirens or the traffic or the noise, right? So we can start to use language, this language of frequency, to understand how we interact with the outside and how how the outside impacts us inside, and that everything is frequency and we're ingesting frequency. So whether it's your words as you're speaking to me,
Yes.
okay, or the vibration, the vibe you're giving me, right?
Hmm.
I'm ingesting that and that's impacting me. And so we're drawing people's awareness to that, as well as what frequency am I emanating? I like to use the metaphor that we're all tuning forks and we're walking around and we're emanating a vibration. And is your fork emanating defense, anger, frustration, irritation, or is it emanating spaciousness, calmness, coherence? And that we impact one another based on how our tuning fork vibrates. So we can entrain
Hmm.
someone into our state of calmness, or we can become entrained into states of fear if we're watching the news every day and that's the only frequency we engage with. It's very hard to maintain a frequency of equanimity and calmness if what we're ingesting is a different frequency, right? That's more aroused, activated, fear-based, right? So much of what I'm doing is playing with these words, as you can see, to
Yeah.
show all the different ways that we can begin to think through the lens and language of sound.
Yeah, it makes me think about heart math in particular, because all of the research that they've done around the electromagnetic field that surrounds the heart and the frequency of that field, and that these heart math techniques, one big part of the techniques is not only the heart centered breathing, but then also activating and uplifting or replenishing emotion that has a higher vibration or frequency. So they have this whole depletion to renewal grid, and you can move from a depleted state to a renewed state by intentionally activating this higher vibration emotion. And one of the things that was really cool for me around this was realizing, like, we can use memories and experiences to bring activate that emotion, but it's not about the memory or experience, it's about the vibration and working to maintain that vibration, which is what brings us into coherence, which is what allows us to emanate these higher vibrations out into the world.
Yes, I love heart math. I remember speaking with you about them now in the mentorship. I think that they are providing such another way of understanding ourselves as electromagnetic beings,
Yeah.
right? And what we have the capacity to do. Now, in more traditional trauma training, we are taught to create space so that clients can be with their more contracted frequencies, you could say, right? But I feel like this wave occurred, maybe it occurred before 2019, but certainly I became more aware of it at that time or a little bit before, that this idea of coherence and the provider's coherence, heart coherence, had way more of an impact than I realized
Yes.
until I started using sound. And when I started using sound, I realized that the space between me and you experience this in the group, is alive. It's sentient, right? And so if we imbue that space with that heart resonance that you're speaking about, okay, it also interacts, right, with the space of exploration, somatic exploration that we're engaging in sound and using sound. And so then we have the sound, and then we have the provider's resonance at the same time. And that allows us to experience deeper, more subtle and nuanced explorations of the psyche during a sound journey. That's very similar to psychedelic assisted processes.
It is so similar. I just want to say that the use of sound, and in particular, I mean, because in the mentorship we used songs a lot, which was really super impactful. And I think I was saying before we jumped on, like, for me, one of the things that it taught me was how to listen to music with my whole body and not just my ears. And it's just I have a new relationship to music and sound. I'll sit outside and listen to the birds. I never did that before. And it's not anything we explicitly talked about, but all of a sudden, especially sounds in nature, feel really pleasing to my nervous system. I never noticed that before. So there's just like a new awareness of the impact and what I choose to surround myself with in terms of sound. I was outside earlier and I'm like listening to the birds and someone's mowing their lawn and I totally crashed. I'm like, oh, my nervous system does not like that noise at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to listen to the birds. So there's really this new understanding of moving through the world in relationship to what's, to use your word, like what's between us. And I think in Gestalt, it's called the field, right? Like, so to what's happening in the field. And it's all alive. It's all very much alive. And it makes me think too, Resma Menaken, he's a somatic therapist and author, wrote My Grandmother's Hands. He said, clients don't come to us for what we know or our techniques. They come to us for our regulated nervous system, which for me translates to this being in coherence and holding a field for people to be able to access some of these more difficult places.
Yes. And this is why I'm one of the few proponents of, there might be more, but of believing that the providers own attention to their nervous system through their own healing, through using sound themselves, if they are, providers of this program, is part of the delivery.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the product that you're putting on, or it's not just the music you're giving people, it's your own self as an aspect of the healing experience, which is really old school psychotherapy as well when we think about it, right? But that's not really taught in our modern schools of psychotherapy anymore as well.
Right, because a lot of what, or at least up until this point, although I'm hoping things are starting to change a little bit as we understand more about neuroscience and coherence and how important resonance is, it's top down, which doesn't take into account the fact that like we're a whole person creating a space.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more about therapists doing their own work and working with sound as a way of working with their own system?
Sure. Yes. So I'll give my example, and you might have a similar one. Because we're such great students and we probably invested a lot of money and time, we reach a point and we think, well, I'm pretty healed. I think I'm doing pretty good. And I've tended to those places where my wounds are, and I know myself fairly well. And then we put on the sound. And it takes us to some places where we might not even have known that there was wounding. Because sound, especially the Safe and Sound program, is designed to work with the neurophysiology of the attachment and bonding system. So if you are a provider who has developed compensatory strategies throughout your life, because this early foundational regulation wasn't there, you may have explored quite a bit, as I did, of your early childhood in therapy. But the place of studying your experience from 0 to 3 can't happen in talk therapy.
Right.
Because that's not the way we knew ourselves at that time, right? So it's touch and sound. So when a provider engages in their own self-exploration through touch or sound, it's going to take them into places of deep transformation and change, because it's going to go to these early states of development, which will transform you as a provider. And in that way, then you begin to show up differently for your clients, less in your strategies and more in your authentic self. And that place of landing in your authentic self, when that happens, you are able to then hold space differently. You can hold more, your container, right, gets bigger, you have more capacity, you're more regulated, you're less inclined to fixing your clients, you're more able to just be with them and to trust the mystery and to trust the not knowing, which I think you talked about before we jumped on.
Yes, that was another big lesson for me in doing the group listening, because the way it was set up was we would do listening and then we would process. And while listening, things happen. Your nervous system starts to rewire. There's things that are released. There are things that tense. And, part of the process is starting to learn how to pay attention and notice. And I have a very loud inner narrator. And so my inner narrator would just talk its way through everything that was happening. Like, oh, now my head is feeling tight. Oh, now it feels like I'm crying, but there's no tears. So it was just an interesting experience just to watch that. But when I would come back to process, for me, being curious, like I'm sharing all of these experiences, and you and the group would just kind of nod their head and say, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, what do you think that is? But you don't need to know. You just need to let it happen and have awareness, which is hard for somebody who's very curious and wants to know why and what's happening all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think for a provider, the one delivering, it's a paradigm shift to not have all the answers and to allow the space and the process to support the answers to come up organically for that person.
Yeah.
And you may have in your dreams that night gotten some more information to help you integrate what happened. You may have realized something a week later as you had an experience in your life and then realized, oh, that was connected to what happened in the sound. Or you may not completely because it's so nuanced, but you just know something feels different.
Yes. And I think that, well, that's one of the things too. It's always coming back to what's different, not better, not worse. And it could be anything. It could be, I usually eat eggs every day for breakfast. And for some reason today I wanted cantaloupe. I don't know why.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a beautiful example of learning to follow your inner guidance, which is what we're cultivating with this process. And we've become so accustomed to giving away our power and asking someone else or hoping that someone else will give us direction, that we've lost that capacity to cultivate what I call embodied wisdom and the truth coming from inside of you. And I think as a civilization, what we're learning to do is honor everyone's truth as valid and to move out of what this week I started pondering, perhaps it's this codependency as an archetype, right? Where we have to convince or feel that somebody feels the same as us. And if not, we have to justify or defend it, or we can't be in relationship with them if they don't feel the same as us. And it does, for me, it speaks of this archetype of codependency as opposed to each person being interdependent, right? And honoring and valuing that we have different perspectives and that we can find those commonalities and places in the middle, even within our differences.
And that everybody's inner experience is going to be very unique.
Yeah.
One of the things I realized in using safe and sound in my practice with folks is that the music is the medicine. However, the process around paying attention and noticing and doing what your nervous system needs or wants in that moment, or even this idea of what's different and how did you respond to what was different, like that whole process is where a lot of the healing happens because of the empowerment that occurs by virtue of getting to know yourself.
Beautiful. Yes. Yes. And to take it into a more of a psychotherapy, as parents, one of our jobs, or one of the roles we play, is to support our children in understanding their interoceptive cues. So a child, trips and falls and then looks at the parent like, oh, should I cry, or do I need to be afraid? And the parent then models back or mirrors back, oh, take a breath, you're okay, right? And so the child is vibing off of the parent's reaction.
Yes.
Okay, and that helps to shape the nervous system. of the young child. And so that's the terrain that we are now in when we're using sound, because the client will inevitably have reactions. That is supposed to happen. That's part of the intervention. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to be worried about. But it's how the provider responds and mirrors that then allows that to become part of the intervention, and can be even more potent than the sound itself, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So can you say a little bit more about your mentorship program and how you work with therapists around bringing sound into their practice?
Sure. So this program has evolved, I think, because of my love for music in general and sound. And I think that the providers coming also feel an affinity. I'm called to sound, right? So they may come because they've suddenly discovered tuning forks, or they've bought themselves some bowls, or they're picking up the Safe and Sound program. So there's something about this emerging science of sound, and that's exploding, and I have that same love for it. And music has always been a place of healing for me. So I designed the mentorship as a space to hold the provider as they move through a process, not only of understanding sound, how does sound work in general, but all these modalities that we're using, whether it's somatic experiencing, brain spotting, sensorimotor psychotherapy, heart map. What's the common thread? What's the commonality between all of these? And how do we, it's just like I describe it kind of like a pharmacy now. You're a therapist and you have 7 or 8, right? Things in the back of the pharmacy, right? But if you understand frequency, and you understand the concept of coherence, and you understand the concept of embodied presence, and you yourself are going through, my program's now 9 months, a 9-month process of cultivating embodied presence, then it's just going to be a matter of knowing which of the tools you have are going to be most helpful for that client. So you may go in and pick up brain spotting, or you may pick up EMDR, you may pick up a somatic, or you may pick up the sound. And they're all going to do the same thing at the end of the day if we're looking at it through the lens of coherence, resonance, frequency, titration, pendulation, all these words, right, that we use in the field of trauma healing. And so I think the mentorship, becomes a place for those that have studied a lot of different modalities to find that intersection for themselves. Yeah. With sound being the leading one, right? Because there is an affinity. So we listen to a lot of sound. We listen to Safe and Sound, Rest and Restore. We also just listen to music that I've curated, which you were able to do that. Yeah. And then I have musicians contacting me now to play their music and try their music. So then I'm bringing in some things that are even new to myself as well, which is fun.
That is so cool. Yeah, that's amazing. And so what I'm hearing is that somebody who would most benefit from this mentorship program would be somebody who has an affinity for music or sound, or has been called to use sound for healing purposes, whether that's through tuning forks or singing bowls or just making playlists, which I know a lot of folks do. And also have this like curiosity and this desire to tap into all of these different modalities that really, it sounds like the intersection, I think the intersection of any healing modality is frequency and vibration. I mean, and energy really at the end of the day, because, and I even say, and I've said this before, there's been some pushback in the field around whether it's ethical to bring energy work into a psychotherapy practice. And that's a whole other podcast. But at some point, I realized that we really need to flip this on its head, because psychotherapy is actually energy work. It's the other way around, right? Psychotherapy isn't out here and energy work falls under it. it's like we have energy work, and psychotherapy is one modality because just by virtue of sitting together and exchanging words, we are doing energy work.
Yes, I love it. Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
that's my
Yes.
disclaimer.
No, I love it. Flipping psychotherapy around. I do think it's time for a paradigm shift because the boxes that we've been working in are not big enough to hold all of the need, especially if we speak about ancestral healing, which we haven't yet. And that's the part of my sound program that does have its roots in more indigenous practices and understanding our relationship to the ancestors, the healed ancestors and the ancestors that are healers. And when we start to use sound in this more expansive way, we move into some of the work of Stan Groff, where we start to travel through the psyche into the archetypal realm and into the ancestral realm. And we start to work with the field around us in a more expansive way that allows for intergenerational healing to occur through these mechanisms that you would call energy healing, but have also been used for centuries, right? From other cultures. So at this point, many providers are already engaging in that work without understanding the history behind it. And so some of what I do in the mentorship is help to shepherd them into that, right? That we're tapping into these indigenous practices that are in our roots as well, if we want to travel back in terms of our own lineage. And many of my providers have some sense that in their lineage they had ancestors that were, the medicine woman in the family, and whether that was clear or whether that, comes up during a sound journey.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just kind of bringing us full circle because we do have to start to wrap up this soup of all of these different techniques and tools and learnings, and really just having the willingness to be open and curious, which I think is a vibration in and of itself, right? And that brings information to us, the what we need to know when we need to know it, and the experience of what we need to experience when we need to experience it. And for those who are interested in not only the work that you do in sound specifically, but also the mentorship program, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Sure. So my website is probably the easiest way, www.paulascatoloni.com. Those that are interested in hearing more about this, I do have a new podcast now that they are welcome to listen to called Transformative Harmonics, as well as a YouTube channel where I will be speaking with people like you, Jody, and those that are in the field of sound to, again, keep shepherding this new language, right, into the psychotherapeutic community.
Beautiful. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
No, I feel like we've covered quite a bit. I think you're ending with this question of staying curious and open is important. When we think we know it all, and it can prevent us from growing, but also, our clients can only go as far as we go. So to, stay a lifelong learner if you are a provider, because there's always new experiences, opportunities, and information available that's going to keep shepherding this field forward if you are in the healing field, in whatever role you're in. And also that if you are someone who's interested in psycho-spiritual growth, you may engage in somatic practices, yoga, breath work, Reiki, sound. These are all vehicles for self-exploration that are going to continue to help you unpack and understand yourself more deeply, but ultimately who benefits from that is your clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I love doing this work.
Same here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Paula. This was an awesome conversation. I love all of what you're doing. It's so, I want to say the word cutting edge is coming up for me. I don't know if that quite encaptures the dimension from which you're approaching this work, kind of bringing it into this new realm and giving giving permission for therapists to expand into this space in a way that feels held and thoughtful and meaningful. I think that's what it is.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so glad to have met you, and I hope we can continue to engage, and I'll look forward to talking with you on my podcast as well.
Yay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me on The Spiritually Curious Therapist. I hope today's episode offered insight, inspiration, or a deeper connection to your own healing path. If this show resonates with you, be sure to follow the show, leave a review, and share it with a friend or colleague who's on this healing path too. If you're feeling called to explore this work more deeply, you can find resources, courses, and ways to work with me, including nervous system healing programs and psychotherapeutic Reiki trainings over at therachihealing.com and journeywithkindredsouls.com. And if you're on Instagram, come say hi at Holistic Heart Healing. I love connecting with fellow healers and seekers like you. As always, while I'm a licensed therapist, this podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only and not a substitute for therapy. Take good care of your heart and nervous system. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and stay connected to the wisdom within your heart.